My name is Bianca, and I'm on the developer relations team at Prefect. Today, we will be interviewing Brock Tybert. He is a senior lecturer at the University of Boston. We're really excited to have him on the show today. Welcome, Brock. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thank you. I'm excited to be here. As you noted, I'm a senior lecturer at Boston University. I'm in the information systems department at Questrom, so this the Questrom School of Business. Prior to that, I've had a number of roles, basically all coalescing around data related tasks, whether it's a data analyst or building data products and services and tools. I've been a big data nerd for about 20 years now, and I'm excited to talk a lot about that today.
It looks like your original background was in finance and economics. And I understand that everybody has a really creative path that they take when it comes to getting into their first data position or data professional position. Would you mind walking us through the specific uh, key parts of your professional journey that brought you to where you are now?
Absolutely. So coming out of grad school, I always knew I wanted to do something that was applied. My education, undergrad and grad, was pretty heavy on theory. So I wanted to really come at it from the applied level. And pretty quickly coming out of grad school, I knew I didn't necessarily want to go into the investment side of finance, which is what I was really interested in during grad school. And I landed a role that isn't necessarily super traditional. When you're younger, you don't think of higher education as a business, right? You go to school and you just go to school and you take your classes, but you don't really understand the engine that's behind that. And the role that got me really kickstarted in my journey was being a data analyst at a university here in Boston. And it just everything that I had in grad school, I started to see ways to apply it and start to make decisions and help kind of leadership on the administration side with that process. And it also got me exposed to things like data warehousing, ETL, and how you can draw insights from this really kind of the infrastructure of data. And I've just been absolutely obsessed with that since. So it's not that, the economics and the finance side doesn't still kind of linger for me. I'm obviously very interested in those topics. But really underneath all of that, really what I learned was that the data side of those themes are what drew me in, and I've really focused my career around that.
What does a day in the life of a senior lecturer look like if you want to give us the rundown of what that is?
Sure. So I'm on the teaching side of the faculty. So I predominantly teach. I have a teaching load. And day to day, I'm working on refining my courses. I take a lot of pride in each semester iterating on top of my content to make sure that it's relevant, up to date. Really, I come at it, like I've said a few times already, but the applied side to me is really, really, really important. And I take, some of that idea, what I mentioned in grad school, and saying, what did I wish I had when I was in grad school, and bring that to my classes. And so I really take a lot of pride in reworking my classes and experimenting with the content in my classes and how to deliver that on a day-to-day basis. I love being in the classroom. The greatest, absolute greatest thing in the world is seeing students light up when you can start to see the dots being connected, to different learning themes. And I'm just obsessed with trying to refine and make sure that, each student learns differently, but how I can kind of bring that content forward so that there's something someone will gravitate to in my classes, hopefully, right?
Somewhere along the line, you decided that you were going to be introducing orchestration as a concept that you were going to teach. And if I'm not mistaken, Prefect, in some way, shape, or form, landed into your lesson plan. When did you first hear about Prefect? And then how did that turn into deciding, oh, I'm going to incorporate this into my actual lectures?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So to take one step back, outside of the teaching side of my role, the senior lecturer role, I do advise product and data teams outside of Questrom. And this class that you referenced is something that I saw as an absolute opportunity for one of our programs, our degree programs at Questrom, the MSBA program. So these are students that are looking to go into data analytics, data science, and based on the arc of that curriculum, there's an opportunity to bring in this idea of orchestration. The class, I called it deploying analytics pipelines, right? And the general idea is to say, hey, everything from ETL and moving data from source systems to targets to deploying machine learning models. And then even now with generative AI, right? The whole point is, ingesting data for AI. How do you consume that? Obviously, everyone's talking about RAG now, retrieval augmented generation. And the idea is that I needed something to orchestrate that, and that also had a little bit of, wasn't the worst learning curve, right? And Prefect was perfect, right? If I could say that, in the sense that this program, the course, the students coming into that were heavy into Python. So I knew that, if you look at a syntax, you look at a prefect script, right, where you define some tasks and organize it in a flow, it just reads like a Python script, right? So the learning curve was, minimal for the students, and we could focus on things like orchestration, monitoring, logging. What does deployment look like? What are some design choices in that pipeline? It allowed me to focus very directly on pipelines, design decisions, what can go wrong, how can you do retries, why are retries important, all the things that you give out of the box on Prefect, right, were just made my lectures and kind of the planning of that content so much easier, right? And then on top of it, I just want to make sure I say it up front so I don't forget. The online hosted kind of the ability to run that and see that on Prefect Cloud was an absolute game changer for me, right? Because it goes from saying, hey, how do we develop locally into the cloud? And the point is, deploying analytic pipelines, they deploy to the cloud, so that Prefect Cloud, that free tier that you offered, incredibly generous but incredibly helpful for my course.
Oh, I love to hear that. And for the students, did they receive the lectures well? How did they feel overall when you were teaching them how to use Prefect and going through the projects that you were presenting?
Fairly well, right? I mean, you can probably tell on this interview that I move pretty quickly. I talk pretty quickly. So you can imagine that translates also to my classes. So, I throw a lot at my students. I know that I do. I tell them that I know that, right? But Prefect wasn't, the bottleneck in the class, right? It shouldn't be the bottleneck. And that's what I appreciated about your framework and what you provide for resources, is that it allowed me to focus on concepts, right? And students saw this early on in the semester. I had one slide, and I would put this up. It's concepts greater than tools, right? You're building these concepts, and Prefect just so happens to make those concepts very, very, very simple to use, deploy, and build on top of.
As far as your own learning curve with getting used to learning Prefect and teaching it to yourself, what resources did you rely on?
So documentation, of course, I think your documentation site's fantastic. There's some great examples. I think just outlining kind of the mental model there is great as well. But more often than not, leaning on the Slack community. I can't tell you how often I would post on there. Yourself and others would post super fast, right? Getting back to us. I mean, incredible community. And it's nice too. I say in my class a lot, it's a safe space. And I think your Slack is obviously a safe space for someone that's starting out or a little bit more seasoned in Prefect. I appreciated that a lot, and it got me through some of the few little things that I needed to build out for my class. It was absolutely fantastic.
It's definitely a pleasure having you on there, and we really appreciate you even helping out with some of the questions that people have asked.
Thank you very much. I mean, like I said, it's a really safe space. A lot of interesting questions. You can learn a lot from the dialogue on the community, and I think it also helps you stay kind of in tune with what's being developed and feature releases and all that's coming down the pipeline. And I think that's really important, especially, I know my role and kind of how I'm framing this is for the classroom experience. But if you're building on Prefect, right, yes, you're going to see releases, but there's also an element of, what's going on? What are we thinking about? What are you all thinking about, I should say? And kind of staying in tune with where the framework and the tool is going is, I think, super important and very clearly visible on Slack.
Do you have any suggestions for newcomers to Prefect? Any tips or tricks that you have to offer in regards to getting started?
Maybe cliche, but start small. Do not try to write the most robust pipeline that you think you want to deploy. I say that as someone that does that all the time and just never learn. I don't start small, but I would tell my students really something simple, right? Something is, in my case, right, grab a data set from the web, maybe a little bit of pre-processing, a traditional ETL type of flow, and maybe just write it to a cloud storage or something like that. Like something very, very basic where there isn't a lot of moving parts, so that you can get the mechanics down of the framework. You can see data flowing. You can see what kind of logging looks like and get a sense of all of that prior to saying, hey, the first time I see a pipeline, executed through a flow, what's going on, right? I think it streamlines this idea of, the learning curve, but also getting your bearings on how to use the framework.
What are some of the things that you are planning on accomplishing in the new year? And do you see Prefect helping out with any of those endeavors?
Oh, absolutely. First of all, it was, part of the role as being faculty is I get to learn too, right? I get to learn, I get paid to learn. So it's nice to learn a new framework and think about kind of how I can use Prefect for a variety of tasks. coming year, I want to get back into blogging and putting a lot more content out there. Over the last few years since I joined Questrom, I've really focused a lot on my classes and kind of building out those classes and refining that. So it'd be nice to kind of, now that I'm stabilizing, to get a little bit back out there and talking about some of the things that I'm interested in and kind of putting it out there through blogs and maybe some short YouTube videos and things like that. But also in terms of Prefect, right? I mentioned before that, I do advising, and every organization's a little bit different in terms of the stack that they want. But Prefect is so simple, right? You get started, it's just Python scripts. So any kind of maybe smaller or medium sized firm that maybe isn't all in on the cloud or other types of scenarios, right? It's that learning curve, get a data team off the ground is straightforward. And I think kind of the path to deployment is really fantastic. So I kind of always think about that in terms of, some of the conversations I have outside of Questrom in terms of, hey, where's your stack lineup? By the way, Prefect is pretty awesome.
Alrighty then. Well, thank you everyone at home for tuning in. And Brock, thank you again so much for joining me today on this call. I really appreciate it. It was a wonderful opportunity to talk with you, and we'll see you around in the Prefect community.
Thank you so much. It's great. And I thank you for all that you do with the community. It's fantastic.
Wonderful. Take care.
Bye.